The galaxy had laws older than most civilizations could imagine. They called it the Stars Law. It was simple in words but impossible to break in practice. Every race, every species, every fleet had to follow it. No one could take more than they deserved. No one could dominate another, and every star system had its balance. For centuries, this law kept the galaxy in order, but some saw the law as a cage. Some, like the Zorvath, thought rules were only for the weak. The Zorvath were clever and ruthless. Their ships gleamed black in the void, each one armed with weapons that could destroy whole planets. They had studied the galaxy for centuries, waiting for the right moment to strike. Trelka, their supreme commander, had grown tired of following rules that limited her people's power. She wanted more, much more. She wanted entire star systems under her control, and she did not care who had to die to achieve it. Her fleet moved silently, preparing to break the law, to take what others had protected for millennia. Far from the Zorvath fleet, on a small blue planet tucked in the Orion spiral, humans went about their lives unaware of what was coming. Humans were young in the galaxy's history, but they were clever, determined, and unpredictable. They had survived wars, famine, and countless disasters on their planet. They had learned to fight, to plan, and to protect what they loved. For humans, survival was not just about strength. It was about thinking ahead, about using strategy and courage in equal measure. Unknown to the Zorvath, humanity had been watching the stars for decades. They knew the galaxy was not as calm as it seemed. They built fleets, studied alien tactics, and learned the rules of the Stars Law, not to obey blindly but to understand the limits of power. Humans knew that the law could be used as a weapon, that patience and planning could defeat even the strongest enemy. They were ready even if the galaxy did not yet realize it. Then the first signals appeared. Sensors on the outer planets of the human territory detected ships unlike any they had seen before. The Zorvath fleet had arrived, massive and silent like a shadow moving across the stars. Their intent was clear: domination. The humans did not panic. Instead, they prepared. Fleet commanders gathered around screens, plotting movements, checking every possible strategy. In the human command center, Captain Ilara stood tall. Her eyes were calm but focused, filled with the quiet fire of determination. "They think they can take what they want," she said softly, almost to herself. "They do not know us. They do not know what humans are capable of." Across the void, the Zorvath warships moved closer to the first human system. They expected fear, submission, and chaos. The galaxy had taught them that most species broke quickly when faced with impossible odds. But humans were different. Every human ship, every pilot, every crew member carried a single thought: protect their people, protect their world, and use every ounce of strategy and skill to survive. Ilara looked at her fleet through the observation window. Thousands of ships, each one a small but deadly part of a larger plan, floated in formation. They were not the largest fleet in the galaxy. They were not the most powerful, at least not in raw firepower, but they were united, intelligent, and fearless, and that was something the Zorvath had not counted on. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the two forces stared across the void. On one side, a fleet built on fear and ambition, ready to break the law. On the other, a young species, underestimated and underestimated again, waiting with patience and a secret strength. The first battle was coming, and it would not be a battle of weapons alone. It would be a battle of minds, courage, and the will to survive against impossible odds. Humans had one advantage the Zorvath could not see: a strategy shaped by hope, unity, and centuries of overcoming the impossible. And when the first attack came, the galaxy would learn that underestimating humanity was the greatest mistake any species could make. The Zorvath fleet advanced slowly but with deadly precision. Each ship moved like a predator stalking its prey, engines humming softly, weapons ready to unleash destruction. From the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Trelka watched the approaching human systems. She was confident. She had destroyed countless civilizations before, and she expected humans to be no different. Submission was the natural response to power, she believed. Fear was universal. Then the warning was broadcast. Across the stars, the Zorvath voice resonated like ice through the void. "Leave these systems immediately. Obey the Stars Law, or face total annihilation." The message was calm, almost polite, but the threat beneath it was unmistakable. Entire planets could vanish in moments if humans did not comply. In the human command center, Captain Ilara heard the message, her eyes narrowing. She did not flinch, did not panic. Instead, she turned to her officers and spoke firmly, her voice calm but filled with resolve. They think words will scare us. They think the weight of their fleet is enough to bend us. Let them see that humans are not ruled by fear. Her words spread quickly through the fleet. Pilots, engineers, and soldiers felt a renewed energy, a quiet fire that came from knowing they were ready for this moment. For humans, preparation was as important as courage, and courage alone was never enough. Every move they made had been carefully planned, every contingency considered. The Zorvath may have been strong, but humans were clever, unpredictable, and united. Trelka did not understand humans, and that was her first mistake. She expected them to act like other civilizations, beg for mercy, scatter in panic, or surrender completely. But humans were different. They did not bow easily, and they did not surrender without a fight. They thought, they planned, and they acted with purpose. As the Zorvath ships closed in on the nearest human system, sensors picked up every movement. Hidden behind asteroids, cloaked in shadows and ready to strike, human ships waited silently. The first strike would not come from raw power, but from precision, strategy, and the element of surprise. Ilara's fleet moved as one, coordinated yet flexible, like a living organism. She knew every ship, every pilot, every weapon. She trusted her people completely. "We do not fight to destroy," she said quietly. "We fight to protect. Our strength is not in fear, but in unity. Let them learn that lesson." The Zorvath admiral frowned. Her sensors detected nothing unusual. The humans appeared small, almost fragile, but she reminded herself that appearances were deceiving. She had faced clever foes before, yet something about these humans unsettled her. There was a calm determination in their communications, a clarity of purpose that no other species had shown. Suddenly, the human fleet moved. Not in chaos, not in panic, but in perfect synchronicity. Ships slipped out of hiding, positioning themselves at points the Zorvath could not see. Minefields were already in place, waiting for the enemy to pass. Sensors and drones mapped every movement, every angle. The humans were not waiting to react. They were forcing the enemy into traps, turning the advantage of numbers into a trap of strategy. Admiral Trelka's voice tightened with frustration. They are not afraid. They are not running.
They are planning.
We cannot see their intentions. We cannot predict them. She had underestimated humans, and the first cracks of doubt began to form in her command. Ilara watched the stars, the human fleet ready and calm. In her mind, she ran through every possible scenario, every risk, but she felt no fear. Humans had survived worse, and they had learned that courage alone was not enough. They needed strategy, intelligence, and heart. And in this moment she knew humanity had all three. The warning had been ignored, as the humans had expected. But it was not defiance born of arrogance. It was calculated, purposeful. They were ready to teach the galaxy a lesson. Never underestimate humans, for when they have a plan, even the strongest force in the universe can be caught off guard. The void between the stars was quiet, but the silence was full of tension. The Zorvath fleet moved forward, each ship a dark shadow against the distant glow of suns. Their weapons gleamed like promises of destruction, and their engines hummed with deadly purpose. To the Zorvath, this was the moment they had been waiting for, a chance to show their strength, to bend a new species to their will. But humans had been waiting too. They did not panic, and they did not rush. Every ship in the human fleet had a role. Every pilot knew the plan, and every crew member understood the stakes. They had prepared for this for years, studying enemy tactics, predicting every possible move, and designing traps that the Zorvath could never anticipate. Captain Ilara stood on the bridge of her flagship, eyes fixed on the starry expanse. Her hand rested lightly on the console, but her mind raced through the plan. "They think they are hunting prey," she murmured, voice steady. "But they are about to find out who the real predators are." The first encounter was sudden. A small Zorvath cruiser had moved ahead of the main fleet, overconfident and reckless. Human sensors detected it instantly, and the trap was sprung. Invisible mines detonated in the void, enveloping the cruiser in a cloud of energy and debris. Alarms screamed across the Zorvath ship as systems failed one by one. Within moments, the cruiser was gone, leaving only a trail of scattered fragments behind. Confusion rippled through the Zorvath fleet. Their formations faltered, their confidence shaken. They had expected humans to scatter, to beg, or to surrender. Instead, they found themselves in a carefully constructed labyrinth of strategy and foresight. The humans struck not with brute force alone, but with intelligence, precision, and timing. Admiral Trelka's claws tightened around the armrest of her command chair. "Impossible," she whispered. Her fleet had never been caught off guard like this. Every move they made seemed anticipated, countered, and exploited. "They are thinking differently. They are planning beyond our calculations." Meanwhile, human ships moved like shadows. Cloaked vessels appeared suddenly behind enemy lines, striking weak points in shields and engines. Drones mapped every movement, relaying real-time data to the command center. Mines and traps were not random. They were calculated to create confusion, to separate the enemy, and to weaken the fleet before the main human forces struck. Yet humans did not fight recklessly. Each attack was precise, designed to neutralize threats while minimizing casualties. Ilara refused to destroy life unnecessarily, even when the enemy seemed unstoppable. She believed strength was measured not by how much you could destroy, but by how wisely you could wield power. The battle unfolded like a deadly dance. Zorvath ships spun to avoid traps, fired blindly into the void, and struggled to maintain formation. Each misstep was met with a calculated counterattack from the humans. Slowly the tide turned. The Zorvath, so sure of their superiority, began to falter. Confusion replaced confidence, hesitation replaced aggression. And still, the humans pressed forward, not with hatred, but with determination. They fought to protect their homes, their families, and the very balance of the galaxy. Every maneuver, every shot, every strategy spoke of resilience, courage, and intellect. Humans were proving that raw power alone could not dominate a species that fought with heart and mind together. From the bridge of her flagship, Ilara watched the remnants of the first Zorvath cruiser drift into the distance. She did not celebrate, but she allowed herself a quiet smile. "They wanted to scare us," she said softly, almost to herself. "They wanted to break the law and bend the galaxy to their will. But they forgot one thing: humans always have a plan. The first contact was over, but the war had only begun. The Zorvath would not give up easily, and the humans knew the battles ahead would be harder. Yet they were ready. They had proven one truth to the galaxy already. When humans fight, they fight with strategy, courage, and an unbreakable will. And that was a force the universe had never truly faced before. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The Zorvath fleet had been shaken, yet they still floated in the void, their engines humming like restless predators. Their confidence was gone, replaced by doubt and fear. They had underestimated humans, and now the consequences of that mistake weighed heavily on every officer, every crew member. Captain Ilara looked at the starfield through her ship's observation window. The glow of distant suns reflected in her eyes, and her mind was already thinking several steps ahead. Humanity had won the first engagement, but this was not a victory to celebrate. Every loss, every destruction of life carried weight. Humans did not fight for conquest or pride. They fought to protect, to preserve, and to uphold the balance of the galaxy. And that made them different from almost every other species Ilara had studied. Her communications officer spoke softly. "Captain, they're regrouping." "They're confused, but they're still dangerous." Ilara nodded. "I know, but we have something they don't understand. We have strategy, yes, but more than that, we have morality. Every choice we make, every maneuver is guided by what is right, not just what is effective. That is why they cannot predict us. That is why they fear us without knowing it." Across the void, the Zorvath officers whispered among themselves. "Why do they fight this way?" one asked, voice trembling. "Why don't they simply surrender? They could have fled. They could have begged for mercy." Trelka's claws tightened around her console. "Because they are humans," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "They are not like others. They do not fight for fear or hunger or power. They fight for each other. They fight for life itself. That is why we cannot break them with weapons alone." The humans, meanwhile, sent messages to the Zorvath. Not threats, not ultimatums. They offered choices: retreat and leave the system, or continue their attack and face precise, calculated consequences. Every communication carried clarity and honesty, showing the humans' intent to protect rather than to dominate. It was a style of warfare the Zorvath had never seen. Most species would either fight to kill or surrender in terror, but humans combined strategy with morality. turning the rules of engagement into an unexpected weapon. Ilara turned to her second-in-command. "We must remain strong but also just. If we destroy them completely, we become like them. We fight to survive, not to annihilate. That is the lesson we must teach, not through words but through action." The Zorvath officers began to question themselves. Doubt crept into their ranks. Some whispered that perhaps their empire, built on fear and power, was fragile. Others wondered if their desire to break the star's law had been foolish. They had never faced an enemy who could fight so fiercely yet with so much restraint. Humanity's moral code had become a weapon, invisible yet deadly. Ilara watched the enemy from her bridge, her heart steady. She felt compassion for the Zorvath, even as she prepared to face them in battle again. She understood that fear, pride, and ambition could blind even the cleverest species. She understood the importance of teaching, of showing strength without cruelty. Humans fought not to win trophies or to claim glory. They fought to protect life and uphold a balance that the universe itself had demanded. The moral dilemma hung in the void like a silent weight. Humanity could have crushed the Zorvath fleet completely, ending the threat forever. But they chose restraint, using precision, strategy, and morality to guide every action. That choice would define them, not just in this battle, but in the history of the galaxy. In the quiet after the first fight, Ilara spoke softly to her crew. "They think they can bend the stars, break the law, and dominate us. But they do not understand humans. We fight for more than survival. We fight for what is right. And in that, we are unstoppable." Somewhere in the shadows of the nebula, the Zorvath fleet paused. They were beginning to realize a terrifying truth. Raw power alone could never defeat humans. For humanity had something the galaxy had never fully understood: strength guided by morality, courage tempered by wisdom, and hearts that refused to break, no matter the odds. The void was alive with tension as the Zorvath fleet advanced toward the human armada, their ships gleaming like black predators in the cold light of distant stars. Trelka had learned from the first encounter that humans were not ordinary. They had intelligence, cunning, and a strange fearlessness that unsettled even the most seasoned officers. Yet she was determined to crush them. "This time we will not be surprised," she vowed, her claws gripping the command console. But humans had anticipated this. They had studied the patterns of the Zorvath, predicted their aggression, and prepared an intricate trap. Hidden within a dense nebula, the human fleet lay in wait, cloaked and silent like a spider waiting for the first careless fly. Mines and drones were scattered throughout the gas clouds, invisible to enemy sensors. Every path the Zorvath could take was monitored, every movement predicted. Captain Ilara stood on her bridge, eyes steady, heart calm. "Remember," she said, her voice echoing through the ship, "we fight to protect, not to destroy. Precision and patience are our weapons. They will not see us coming until it is too late." Her crew nodded, their confidence bolstered by years of preparation and trust in each other. The Zorvath fleet entered the nebula, engines thrumming as they moved carefully through the dense clouds. They believed their superior technology would see them through, that no trap could harm them. Yet almost immediately, their formation was tested. One ship veered to avoid an invisible mine, only to trigger another hidden in the shadows. Explosions rippled through the fleet, throwing ships off course and disabling key systems. Panic began to spread, a sensation unfamiliar to the Zorvath, whose previous victories had always been easy and predictable. Ilara's fleet struck next. Cloaked human ships emerged from the mist, attacking weak points in the enemy shields. The Zorvath tried to respond, but every move they made had already been calculated, anticipated, and countered. Drones relayed exact positions, while precision torpedoes tore through engines and weapon arrays. Chaos spread among the enemy ranks, and the Zorvath began to realize they were trapped, not by brute force, but by human strategy. From her command chair, Admiral Trelka growled. "Impossible," she hissed. "They know everything we do before we do it." Her officers scrambled to regain control, but the nebula was a maze and humans had mastered it. Each attempt to regroup was met with another surprise attack, another clever maneuver. The humans were not just fighting, they were teaching, showing what intelligence and planning could do against sheer power. Ilara watched calmly as the battle unfolded. She did not rush, did not panic, did not underestimate the enemy. Every move was precise, every decision purposeful. She had trained her fleet to act as one organism, each ship anticipating the other's actions, each crew member understanding their role in the greater strategy. Human lives were precious, yet their courage was immense. Every attack minimized casualties, while enemy aximizing effect, a lesson in discipline, patience, and the power of unity. Slowly, the Zorvath began to falter. Ships collided in confusion, weapons malfunctioned, and coordination dissolved. For the first time, Trelka felt fear, not for herself but for her fleet, for her empire. She realized the humans were not just fighting. They were shaping the battle itself, using the rules of the galaxy to their advantage. Ilara turned to her crew, a quiet smile on her face. "They thought they were predators," she said softly. "But we are hunters too, and we do not rely on fear. We rely on planning, courage, and unity. They will learn what it means to face humans at their best." As the nebula shimmered with explosions and the soundless chaos of space war, the tide shifted completely. The humans had transformed the battlefield into their own advantage, turning the superior Zorvath fleet into a disorganized force. It was not sheer power that won this moment. It was intelligence, patience, and heart. And in the cold silence after the storm, the galaxy could already feel the truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. They had proven that when strategy, morality, and courage combined, even the greatest force could be made to falter. The Zorvath fleet reeled in confusion, their once perfect formation shattered. Explosions from the nebula hung in the void like silent storms, painting the darkness with flickers of fire and debris. Trelka's claws gripped the control console, knuckles white. Every plan she had made, every calculation had been anticipated, countered, and undone. She had thought victory was certain, but humans had shown her how fragile confidence could be. Across the void, Captain Ilara observed the battlefield with calm eyes. Her fleet moved like a living organism, each ship knowing its role, each crew member trusting the other. Humans did not attack recklessly. They attacked with purpose. Every strike minimized unnecessary destruction, while maximizing strategic advantage. It was not just a fight. It was a lesson in how intelligence, discipline, and morality could turn even the strongest enemy into something manageable. "Open communications to the Zorvath," Ilara ordered. Her voice was steady, not harsh. She did not shout. She did not demand submission. Humans fought differently. They believed in power guided by wisdom, not cruelty. Her officers exchanged surprised glances, but they obeyed. In moments, the calm, steady voice of Captain Ilara resonated across the void. "You sought to break the star's law," she said. "You came here thinking you could dominate, thinking you could take without care. But humans are not like other species. We do not bend to fear. We do not destroy without reason. Leave this system. Never return. Learn that power without wisdom is fragile." The Zorvath ships paused, stunned. Trelka stared at the communications screen, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. She expected threats, anger, and rage. Instead, she found calm authority, mercy, and clarity. The humans were not boasting. They were teaching, demonstrating a power far greater than weapons or numbers. Her fleet whispered doubts among themselves. They had underestimated these humans. They had assumed fear would bend them, that firepower would command obedience. But humans were proving that strength was not only about destruction, it was about planning, morality, courage, and unity. And for the first time, Trelka understood that her own force, as mighty as it was, could not easily crush a species that fought with heart and mind in equal measure. Ilara continued, her voice unwavering. "You sought to bend the galaxy, to break the law, to take what was not yours. We could destroy your fleet completely, but we choose restraint. We fight to protect life, not to dominate. Remember this lesson well." Slowly, one by one, the Zorvath ships began to retreat. Engines flared as they pulled back, wounded and shaken. The nebula that had once seemed threatening to humans had become a trap for their enemies, and they had emerged unscathed. Humans had turned the tables not through sheer power but through intelligence, preparation, and restraint. Ilara allowed herself a quiet breath. The fleet was intact, the planets they protected remained safe, and the lesson had been delivered. Humanity had not only defended themselves, they had sent a clear message to the galaxy. Underestimate humans at your peril, for they fight with a combination of mind, heart, and courage that no enemy can predict. Trelka's fleet disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind wreckage and silence. Her pride was wounded, her certainty broken, She had faced civilizations before, but none had challenged her in the way humans had. None had fought with intelligence and mercy together. The memory of this defeat would haunt the Zorvath for years, a lesson in humility they could not ignore. Elara watched the stars after the battle, her thoughts calm. She thought of the people on every planet her fleet protected, of the lives she and her crew had saved. Humans had proven themselves once again, not through domination but through strategy, courage, and the choice to fight for what was right. And in the quiet aftermath, one truth became clear. Humanity was a force the galaxy had underestimated for too long. They were not just survivors, not just fighters, they were teachers, guardians, and strategists, showing the universe that courage guided by wisdom could overcome even the greatest threat. In that moment, the stars themselves seemed to recognize the lesson. Humans had won not just a battle, but respect, fear, and admiration from any who watched, and the galaxy would remember it for generations. The nebula had quieted. Smoke and debris from the battle floated in the void, drifting between distant suns. The Zorvath fleet had retreated, their pride shattered, their confidence shaken, and their minds heavy with the realization that humans were unlike any enemy they had faced. Captain Elara watched the stars, calm and resolute. The battle was over, but its lessons would ripple through the galaxy for generations. Humans did not celebrate victory with boastful cries or destructive shows of force. They celebrated survival, strategy, and the lives they had protected. Each crew member aboard the fleet felt a quiet pride, the kind that comes not from destruction, but from having stood firm when the universe tested them. They had not only defended their homes, they had shown that humans could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast the most formidable foes. Elara reflected on the choices that had led to this moment. They had prepared, they had planned, and they had fought with precision. Yet more than tactics, it was humanity's unwavering morality that had defined their success. They had chosen restraint when they could have crushed the Zorvath completely. They had chosen to teach a lesson rather than to punish blindly. That choice, she knew, would echo through the cosmos. In the aftermath, messages from other civilizations began to arrive. Word of the human fleet's strategy, discipline, and mercy spread quickly. Some species watched in awe, inspired by a species that had stood against overwhelming power and not only survived but triumphed with wisdom. Others, like the Zorvath, feared the lessons they had learned the hard way. Underestimating humans, they realized, was a mistake no one could afford to repeat. Elara's thoughts turned to the future. Humanity had been tested, and the test had proven their strength, not just in firepower but in intellect and heart. They were a young species, but they were clever, adaptable, and unyielding. They had survived impossible odds before, and they would survive again. The galaxy could challenge them. The stars' law could challenge them. But humans had learned that courage guided by strategy and morality could overcome anything. From her flagship, Elara sent a final message across the stars. Not a threat, not a demand. Simply a declaration: we fight for life. We protect the balance of the galaxy, and we will always be ready to defend what is ours. Not through cruelty, but through courage, wisdom, and unity. The Zorvath would remember her words, and every species that heard them would remember what humans had achieved. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long, and now the record was clear. Humans were not to be counted as weak or fragile. They were a force of mind, heart, and spirit, capable of shaping events far beyond their small corner of the cosmos. On the bridge, Elara allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The stars stretched infinitely before her, distant suns casting gentle light on her calm face. She thought of the crew, of the lives they had protected, and of the countless battles humanity had survived on their home planet. That same resilience, that same spirit had carried them into the galaxy, and it would continue to guide them in the future. For the first time, she smiled fully, quietly, knowing that humanity had done more than win a battle. They had defined themselves. They had shown that even in the face of overwhelming force, humans could prevail, not because they were the strongest, but because they were clever, united, and unwilling to compromise their principles. And somewhere across the stars, civilizations whispered stories of a young species that refused to bow, that fought not just to survive, but to uphold a higher code. Humans had earned not only survival, but respect, admiration, and fear. They had taught the galaxy a simple truth: Underestimate humans at your peril, for they fight with a strategy the universe cannot ignore. The legacy was set. Humanity would be remembered not for the wars they fought, but for how they fought, always with courage, always with intelligence, and always with heart. And as the stars twinkled in silent approval, Captain Alara looked out into the endless galaxy and knew that humanity's story had only just begun.